push live, and that usually means that.
I think we are live on Facebook. It's showing that we're live here.
Lovely. Well, Morena, and welcome to this special live stream for the C Word, Surviving Burnout. I'm Helen King, and we have the lovely Faye Lawand joining us to share all her knowledge and wisdom about burnout and stress. So welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning to you and to all your listeners out there. Happy Saturday morning.
Yes, it is a lovely Saturday. It doesn't feel as humid, which is, I think, is very nice.
Yes, always a good thing. Absolutely, Helen.
Hey, I'm really excited to talk to you today because I've been looking into more around stress and Faye is an internal conflict resolution specialist. So I got curious about what that was, and I feel like because I've experienced stress and burnout, I think in my adult life, at least burnout 3 times. And as I was reading through what it was, and I was thinking, yep, this is all sounding very familiar. So I would really love to start with just an explanation of what is an internal conflict resolution specialist.
Happy to do so. So, by the way, when I was like 6 or 7 and, going through school and my teachers or my parents or family members would ask, Faye, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? I never said, oh, I dream of being an internal conflict resolution expert. That wasn't even on my radar, right? But it's need, right? It's your life journey that ends up preparing you for what you end up doing in your adult life, right? And so an internal conflict resolution expert or specialist basically helps individuals resolve the internal conflicts that are keeping them from being, feeling, doing, or having what they want. And then that begs the question, well, what exactly are internal conflicts? Internal conflicts are anything that limits you from those feelings, from those states that you want to have. It's things from the past that haven't been looked at, that haven't been cleaned up, that haven't been resolved and integrated. It's past traumas. It is phobias and fears that really stop you from going where you want to go. It is negative emotions that haven't been processed and cleared up and cleaned up. It is thought patterns that are detrimental and limiting. It's programs of thinking and belief systems that are no longer supportive of where you want to be. It is values that are out of line or unfulfilled. It's needs that haven't been looked at and haven't been met. So it's basically the commonality between all of these examples is that they limit you. They limit you from your full potential. They limit you from being happy, calm, confident, and fulfilled. And the thing is, Helen, we all have internal conflicts, we all have them. And I like to reframe them as an opportunity for growth, progress, and evolution. Because if you didn't have something to work through, you wouldn't really need to seek out solutions and dig within in order to find the internal resources to help you move beyond where you are and towards where you want to go. So we all have internal conflicts just by virtue of being born and having a human journey and a human body, but it's actually resolving them. It's not resolving them that becomes detrimental. It's not the fact that you actually have them.
Yeah. And how did you get to this point? Because I know that you went through your own sort of experience and journey of challenges, and I'm always interested how other people have found a way to kind of move through it and not let those same patterns kind of draw them in over and over again.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did. The patterns did draw me in over and over again. And you mentioned you had 3 bouts of burnout, and so did I. And after each one, I kind of was seeking for solutions that would work for me. And I ended up just in my journey of experimentation and wanting to find a viable solution that didn't involve medication, didn't involve talk therapy. I mean, like, there's no offense to talk therapy, like talking around the problem over and over again, and something that wasn't a quick fix. So it took about 14 years of pulling and studying and piecing together things on my own healing journey that really helped me move beyond where I was and where I wanted to be, and to overcome burnout and not have that be a repetitive pattern, Helen. So it's born out of my own personal journey. Now, I just realized I didn't answer how that personal journey manifested itself with burnout and stress for me. I'm born in the Middle East, in Lebanon, part of the world that, as you know, is rife with conflict and trouble, And I was born into Lebanon right before the start of the Civil War, around 75. And you or your listeners may remember or may know that that war lasted many, many years, over 15 years, and it claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and it dislocated many, many hundreds of thousands more. And my family and I were part of that statistic that were dislocated, and we left the zone of conflict pretty early on in the game. And so what I grew up thinking and believing, Helen, was that I wasn't affected by the war. Conflict hasn't touched my life, and I'm perfectly fine, and I got out early. And all of those things are, to a certain extent, true, but it wasn't until much later on that I realized that I had taken those internal patterns of conflict with me as we were moving from country to country, fleeing the war and fleeing the trouble. And so things were crumbling in my life, in all areas of my life. My career was in shambles, and I didn't really know why. And that created a lot of internal stress and an internal angst. My personal relationships were very troubled and very, very wrought with friction and wrought with negativity. And that created a lot of internal trouble and internal turmoil. My ability to have or be in a happy, committed relationship, romantic relationship, was just leading nowhere. And eventually, because all of these things weren't looked at, my health started to rapidly decline. And that's really, unfortunately, when we start to pause and look and listen and search. And it showed up in my health in very, very real ways. And it was kind of like a syndrome. It was multiple things. It was chronic pain. It was lethargy like I've never experienced before. It was interrupted digestion, interrupted sleep, vertigo that would allow me, like I'd be driving my car to totally lose control of the car, totally. I'd be sitting at my desk at work and I would just fall over, and I had no explanation. And how do you explain it to your colleagues? I had no explanation for what was going on. Rampant anxiety, rampant PTSD. And I was actually convinced that there was something neurologically wrong and biologically wrong. And so when I went and sought out medical help and medical assistance, I was bracing myself for a really frightening diagnosis, medical diagnosis. But the results kept coming back negative. And you would think that I would have been happy. I wasn't happy because my internal dialogue, and it was the dialogue to the doctor, well, you're telling me there's nothing wrong. Why am I feeling so bad on the inside? Why am I so lacking in energy and joy and happiness? And why is life so hard if I'm so healthy? And that's when the journey started, because at the time, the prescription was medication and talk therapy. And neither one was a viable solution for me, Helen. I wanted something that didn't mean that I was just treating the symptom. And I wanted something that didn't mean that I'm just running around in circles talking about what wasn't working out in my life, and which ended up making me feel worse about myself and my life. And that's how the journey began.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about this a bit because I was, I said before that I think in the past couple of days I'd been thinking, how many times in my adult life have things just completely fallen apart, and and the tiredness and all of that stuff. And I think there have been sort of three major times. And then, I don't know what caused my cancer, but I do know leading up to it, I had been through about 3 years of very, very stressful things.
Yes.
Like every time I got to an end of the year, I'd think, right, that's it. I got to the end. this is it, I can carry, and then something else would happen, and then something else, you know, and so by the time the cancer happened, I started thinking, is this my body's way of saying you have not been listening? And I started thinking about how do you live a slower life? How do you live a less complicated life? And I have to say, I did not come to any answers. You know, I read about it, I listened to things, and, you know, because cancer is one of those things, it stops you in your tracks and you do reassess.
Totally.
But I thought, I don't know what the answer is, because I feel like modern life is so set up to feel stressed and pressured and all of those things. I just don't know how to to simplify all of that, so I'm living the best life I can that nurtures myself.
Yeah. Yeah, you're spot on about so much of what you said, but something really stayed with me early on in the piece when you said, is this my body's way of telling me something is off track? And I 100% believe, 100% that the mind is always speaking to us through the body. 100%. You know, when we hear about the mind-body connection, I mean, that plays out in so many different ways, right? But if you think about it, if we are one and we are one, the mind and the body and the nervous system and the emotions and the organs and the senses, if there is an imbalance, or if there is a conflict, or if there is a tension in one area, how else is it going to grab our attention? How else will your mind, because our mind is always communicating with us about what's not working and what's not right, but it doesn't use language. Like, it can't say, hey, Helen, you really need to look at something that happened, you know, about, you know, in your childhood. Helen, you know, the way that you are consuming coffee or alcohol or whatever, as an example, is really not in line with your optimal health blueprint. Hey, Helen, you know, the way that you are living your lifestyle needs to be reassessed. It cannot use language that you can understand that clearly and that blatantly. So it ends up using signals, sensations, right?
Yeah.
Imbalances. When we hear these days, oh, it's normal not to have interrupted sleep. It's normal for digestion to be off track. It's normal to be stressed. It's normal for women to have interrupted periods or painful periods. Well, it may be normal, but it's not natural, because we were actually designed to do all of these things in a very easy, flowy way. But we get in our own way, don't we? If we're not regularly making time to actually look at what's going on, feel what's going on, so important to feel what's going on and to really look at what's going on, eventually these internal patterns of conflict and tension, they grow and they spread, and they actually then present themselves in an undeniable moment of crisis that will allow you to stop in your tracks. Because if it weren't for that physical crisis, I know for myself, I would not have stopped in my tracks. I wouldn't. And when I said I had 3 episodes of burnout, it wasn't until my second one actually, where I also manifested precancerous cells, that I got really serious about this. Because in my first burnout, I'm like, oh, okay, you know, let me maybe, you know, change the way I eat, let me change the way I sleep, let me change what happens inside my mind. Very important. And all of these things actually created a lot of progress, but it wasn't enough. The second round of burnout that I had, which was really, really, really bad, and I manifested those precancerous cells, that's when I'm like, okay, I need to stop here. There's something on the inside, deep on the inside, that is not working, and I need to clear it. And what do you know, when I actually went, and this was when I came across the work of the subconscious mind, and I heard about this thing called the subconscious mind. And it fascinated me, because the explanation was that this is the part of your mind, the part of your brain that stores everything that's ever happened to you, all your emotions, all your thought patterns. And a lot of healing can come when you actually heal from this at a subconscious level. I thought, oh, this actually resonates. Let me go try it out. So I booked in with a therapist who works with the subconscious mind. And the therapist at the time, instructed my subconscious mind to go back to the very first time, the root cause of the burnout, the stress, and all of the pressures and struggles in my current life. My mind went back, traveled back all the way in time to the time that I was about 5, when my family and I were fleeing the war. And it was in the middle of the night. It was just my mom and the 3 kids because my dad was trapped outside of the country. All airports had shut, had closed off. So it was my mother in the middle of the night with a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old fleeing a war zone. And as we were nearing the port, there were bombs flying overhead and snipers in the distance. And my mom, in an attempt to keep us kids safe, she pushed our heads underneath the seats of the car. Well, you know, I went into panic mode. I couldn't breathe. And the nervous system was trapped in a pattern of fight and flight that was never looked at and was never resolved. And that was the seed for unregulated stress responses moving on in my adult life. Now, right now, you and I are nodding, and this makes so much sense. But back then, can I tell you, I was so ignorant and so arrogant. I totally dismissed that. I left that therapist's office thinking, this is ridiculous. How could something that happened when I was 5 have any bearing on where I am right now and all of the health burnout issues that I'm experiencing? Well, I mean, of course, like, how could it not, Helen? How could it not? It took a while for me to actually come around to that idea. And then that's when I started actually looking a lot deeper and clearing all of those internal conflicts. When I did that, all my physical symptoms cleared, the precancerous cells cleared, the anxiety cleared. At the time, my digestion was very bad, my skin, my sleep, all of that cleared and came on board and came on track, because the mind no longer needed to use those systems in my body to communicate with me that it's breaking on the inside and it's hurting on the inside and it needs attention on the inside. And so I cannot stress or overstress enough the importance of looking at all of this unresolved stuff on the inside. You don't need to have been born into a war zone to experience internal conflicts. We all have them.
And there's a really good comment here from one of our listeners, and I really relate to this. Jennifer says that her dreams really let her know the cause. It's hard to process that feeling in real life as it's painful, but acknowledging what it is really helps understand why I feel burnt out or why I'm feeling triggered sometimes.
Yeah.
And I really relate to this because I'm the same, where I've had a lot of trouble of sort of processing emotions or being able to identify in with them. But I feel like I process a lot of big stuff in my subconscious because it comes out in my dreams.
Of course.
So, I really relate to that I have had so much trouble in actually my whole life of being able to be okay with how I feel, that it comes out in lots of other different ways.
And it's not, thanks for that, Jennifer. And just like myself as well, when I was going through, all of those, big periods of burnout and health issues, the dreams were like unbelievably vivid. But the thing is, that's your subconscious, right? And if you're not attending to the clearing process regularly, your mind needs to process and detoxify those memories and those emotions in some way or some shape or somehow. And just one little thing, one little seed I want to plant with you and Jennifer and anyone else who's listening. The thing about processing emotions and thoughts and all of that negativity, you don't need to do it on a conscious level. The best, easiest, fastest, most gentle way to do it is at a subconscious level, at the level at which they're created and stored, where you don't really need to be conscious of what's going on, and you don't need to be revivifying the negative experiences or the hurtful emotions. And I think a lot of us shy away from dealing with our emotions for a number of reasons. First of all, we don't understand the relevance of dealing with them. And I think we've been conditioned to believing that being emotional is not a good thing. But also, I think another reason, right? And I think another reason, we don't know the tools, we don't really have the tools, and we don't want to re-experience the uncomfortable emotions that we felt. And we're trying to deal with those emotions on a conscious level, but that's not where they're stored. And that's not where they're playing out in your life. You need to be doing it at the subconscious level, and you'd be amazed at how quickly they resolve at a subconscious level. I mean, that's what I do in my clinic every day. Like, these things resolve so quickly when the intention and the readiness is there.
I'm really fascinated by this, because I have done talk therapy before, and what I have found it useful for is just sometimes just dropping in somewhere and saying, hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
But I've never ever found it useful for resolving anything, because
because for a number of reasons, that was my experience as well, and that's what led me to do the work that I'm doing now. Because there's a few things with talk therapy that I feel are not producing the results that many of my clients that come and see me tell me they want. First of all, you're working on the problem at a conscious level, and as we said, the problem is not created at the conscious level. And for many of us, if will and conscious thinking and thinking about the problem were enough, I think all of us would have resolved our issues by now, right? Because we know a lot, especially nowadays, Helen, right? Like, we can research anything online, and you can understand pretty much everything online, but that's not what's going to make the difference, because your mind is primarily subconscious, right? Primarily. So that's one of the reasons what I have found, and my clients tell me can be quite restrictive about talk therapy. The other reason is that it keeps you locked into the problem and the negative feeling, and that's not where you want to be. As you're seeking out therapy solutions, can I just plant the seed with you, with Jennifer, with your listeners, that you seek out therapy solutions that are outcome based, that look at, okay, where do you want to go? What do you want to feel instead? What do you want to be doing instead? What do you want to have instead? Do you know, in where I work, it's not that I don't care to know, like, I don't need to know what happened to you. I don't need to know. And I find my clients tell me that it's so freeing. I need to know, how do you feel now? How do you want to feel instead? And when you feel that way, how will your life be different? Now let's get your mind to do that for you. And you'll be amazed at how quickly the mind does that for you. Because that's the mind that's there to actually service you and to take care of you. And that's the same mind that is in the body. It's the same mind that stores your emotions and your memories. It's the same mind that beats your heart, that breathes your lungs, that digests your food. And so when it makes sense that when there's troubled memories, troubled internal conflicts, you're going to have trouble with the internal physical systems of the body.
Absolutely. And because I was diagnosed with having ADHD this year, and I'll be 40 in a month. And so I've gone through my whole life not understanding why I was slightly different, and it got misdiagnosed with all sorts of other things. And the reason I bring this up is because the most helpful things were the psychiatrist that diagnosed me, because she validated that actually, yeah, your brain is wired differently, and that's okay. That's
totally.
And it was like this giant weight lifted off me. But then I saw an ADHD coach, and she was very much like what you're saying. Is she was like, I'm going to do 6 sessions with you, because if we can't sort out things 6 sessions, I don't want it to drag out. But one of the things that she really focused on with me was, what are those core beliefs that are holding you back and lead to your reactions? And this is the interesting part for me, is because if I think about every time I have burnt out, if I go right back to what is that core belief, is that there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, and that I'm wrong. And it was like this moment where I went, wow, that happened from little, because I had this I guess a neurological thing that no one picked up on, and was constantly being told, why are you like this? And so
And so
that
there's an
carried through.
internal story that was created about the way you view yourself. That internal story about the way you view yourself also created feelings, emotions about yourself and about life that were also subconscious, and to a certain extent maybe were repressed or suppressed or not looked at or not examined or whatever. And over time, the momentum, the energy of that accumulates, and it has imprints in the body.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm sure you watched that movie Heal.
No, I haven't.
Oh, the documentary. Oh my gosh, Helen, please go on to Netflix and download or stream or whatever that documentary Heal, Heal. It is, I actually prescribe it to my clients because it looks at the three chronic situations. One is cancer, one is chronic pain, and I forget about the other one. And they have the top leading mind-body experts in the world looking at prescriptions for healing for these three cases, but also these prescriptions for healing become prescriptions for prevention. And they come up with like 9 guidelines to heal or 9 guidelines to prevent disease. And of those 9, you would not be surprised to hear that only 2 involve the physical body, only 2. The other 7 are all about the internal reality and what's happening internally. It's things like forgiving your past. It's things like having a sense of purpose. It's things like dealing with your negative stuff. It's things like managing your stress differently. It's all of these things that are not about the physical body, because there's this understanding that what happens on the inside can either heal you or reverse the effects of dis-ease.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, because in a few weeks I'm having someone on the show to talk about, there is a book called Radical Remission, and the same author wrote Radical Hope.
Yeah.
And I've been slowly listening to Radical Hope on an audio book, and it's the exact same thing, that actually when Kelly Turner looked into the research around people who had, gone into a spontaneous remission from cancer, it wasn't the physical things. Like, there was a little bit around, eating well and nourishing your body, but all that other stuff actually came down to in here. And I find that really interesting, because it's also, I've had the privilege of interviewing lots of different people, especially for this podcast. And I find often when people have an incurable diagnosis, the way that they deal with that is by shifting that perspective, honing in on what's important. And I sometimes think it's so it's sad that for so many of us, it takes getting really, really sick or our life being at risk to go, actually, what's important to me? What do I need to get rid of?
And how fortunate are we that we heed the call? Because many people don't heed the call, do they? No. We heed the call, and we use that challenge as an opportunity for change and growth. Well, you said something about how interesting is it about, how the inside also kind of like affects the outside. I find it interesting, but I also find it very empowering, because it kind of puts the hope back on you, that it's not the medical establishment, it's not the oncologist, it's actually you. And once you're able to create those internal realities that are supportive of health for yourself, the other thing is no one can take them away from you, because then they become patterns and imprints for success in all areas of your life, not just in your physical health, but your emotional health, your relationship health, your social health, and so on.
I want to ask about something that I watched one of your little a short video on your YouTube channel, and I thought this was a very interesting comment, and it sort of made me stop and think about it. Is that you say stress isn't the issue.
Yes, it's not the problem. That is, see, because that is my mission, is to change the attitudes of burnt out professionals around stress and managing stress. All of us have been fed a belief. Well, I don't want to say we've been fed a belief. You know, we have been conditioned to believe that all stress is harmful, stress is a killer, therefore we need to manage it. And my experience has been, you know, when I was going through my burnouts and I heard that I need to start managing my stress, I actually started researching all the stress management techniques out there, and I started applying them into my life. You know, I was doing my breathing, and I was doing my meditation apps, and I started yoga and qigong, and I was doing my essential oils, and I was doing a lot of the herbal supplements, and I really was doing it all. But yet, Helen, I was still feeling stressed and overwhelmed. Okay, less than before, for sure, less than before, but it wasn't, I didn't feel resilient enough. And that really frustrated me. And this was the last piece actually to come on board in my system relating to stress differently. And it wasn't until I came across the groundbreaking research of the new science of stress that I understood that actually stress doesn't need managing, it needs transforming. And I just want to talk a little bit more about that. So there's 3 reasons why we need to stop managing stress. First of all, is you're probably doing it and you're still experiencing, you know, stress. The other really important reason about stress not being the problem is because stress actually is about, it can fuel your life if you have the mindset that allows you to access the new stress responses that the research has uncovered. I don't know about you, but I know growing up and until I came across this body of research 2 years ago, I believed there was only one stress response: fight, flight, freeze. Yeah. That's what I was told. That's what I believed. And I lived my life by that belief. We're talking about how our beliefs govern our reality. That's how I lived my life. And that belief meant that I was doing things that were not allowing me to tap into resilience. When I came across the work of the new science of stress, and I actually found out that the research has pointed to 3 new stress responses, each of which actually has an advantageous biochemical hormonal profile that allows us to tap into internal resources and coping mechanisms that allow us either resilience or growth or energy or focus or performance or connection. It just completely changed the way I relate to stress. And it's meant that now I wasn't managing stress, but looking at transforming it. But because if you just stop to think about managing something, you're just coping with it, right? Like, it is a bit of a deficit mindset. But if you think about what the research is telling us, transforming stress, that is more about change, right? It's about shifting, it's about altering. It is more hopeful. It is a different mindset. But the key in accessing those benefits and those new stress responses is, you probably guessed it, internal. It is the internal mindset. And what you do in here that will allow you to either move from a fight, flight to one of these beneficial stress responses that can be advantageous to your life. And the other third reason why stress is not the problem is because we are not resetting the nervous system as often as we need to, Helen. You know, like, we are neurologically equipped to deal with stress and even recover from trauma. But the problem is that we override that capacity to heal from stress and trauma because we don't go into that other part of the nervous system that knows how to repair, restore, and heal. And so we're just going from one stressful week, one stressful life situation, one stressful episode, one deadline to the next, without shifting over to the other part of the nervous system that knows how to reset after trauma. You look at animals in the wild, you know, animals in the wild, our nervous system is more complex than theirs. After a traumatic incident, after their life, after they survive a survive a threat to their life, they don't develop chronic PTSD, and they don't develop burnout, and they don't develop chronic anxiety and chronic insomnia. And the reason for that is they literally remove themselves and they literally shake off the effect of the trauma. We don't do that. We have the capacity to do it, but we don't do it. And that's why I say stress is not the problem, because you're probably managing the stress and it's not working for you. It's not about managing stress, it's about transforming it. And you need to be doing something to reset the nervous system regularly.
So how do we manage stress differently?
By transforming it.
Yeah.
And by transforming it, so actually I have, because this was the last piece in my journey, and the piece that has made the biggest, most profound difference in the way I do wellness and well-being. I set up actually a 6-week course to really take you by the hand and introduce you to the science, the knowledge, and the content and the concepts, but more importantly, to then show you practical tools and hold your hand as you apply, integrate, and implement. Because Helen, as you know, we know, like we said it again, you can go out there and research whatever it is that you want to research, but what's going to make the difference is how you apply it and implement it in your daily life, and having the support along the way and the system to show you how to do it. But since you asked, I just wanted, the way you do it is by changing your mindset. First, it starts by educating yourself about the new science of stress. And you're very welcome, you and your listeners, to go New Science of Stress, Kelly McGonigal, go on to TEDx. There's a lot of great TEDx talks and information. It starts with knowledge. You do need knowledge. And then you need to start applying that knowledge in concrete ways in your life. Shift the mindset, because it is the mindset that then is going to create the different biological response in the body, so that you tap into internal resources of strength when the stress response is activated, and not a debilitating effect. And there's the mindset piece is really where it comes in, and it's not something that you can do in one day. There is no quick fixes with anything, right? But it is the mindset piece. It's becoming aware of how you currently do stress, and it's then starting to implement those other ways and those other tools that the New Science of Stress talks about. But if you're interested in more information, if anybody is on here, please get in touch, and I'm really, really happy to share more information with you. And there's still, we're starting actually with the content on Monday. So if anybody on here would like to join, I'm very happy to guide you through the content with the rest of the group.
Oh, fantastic. And I'll chuck some links up as well, because I'm definitely going to have a look into this.
Yeah, we'd love to have you, and would love to talk to you about it, Helen.
Yeah, because it's funny, because I can remember a few months before I got cancer, I went on a holiday, and I felt riddled with anxiety. Wow. Because just work had become very, very stressful. Yeah. And I stayed at this really lovely place up in Mangawhai, just further up north. And the guy and his wife had this lovely place, and they did yoga and all of these things, because he had been a journalist like I had been. And I kept thinking, the thing is that I don't like yoga. So I can't quit my job and become a yoga teacher, because that's just not me. It's not my personality. And so it's that I think for me, sometimes it's that all or nothing thinking of either I need to move to the middle of nowhere and have no stresses anywhere. But I think actually I'm someone who needs a lot of stimulation. I'm someone who likes sort of interesting work and things. So that was never going to be a solution for me.
No, but the thing is, and that's part of the problematic subconscious belief that we've bought into, that we need to avoid stress. And therefore, to avoid it means to either quit a job, leave a relationship, move countries, or whatever. But the thing is, life is stressful. And I don't mean it in a way that is detrimental or overbearing, but if you think about stress as a response to a demand in your environment or a demand in your life, then there is stress. But this is the thing, not all stress is bad for us. And we've been so brainwashed, conditioned to believe that all stress is bad, that we feel like to manage stress is either to do yoga or it's an all or nothing, quit my job. And that can be quite limiting. And it's very costly to try and avoid stress because A, you can't do it. It then creates a loop of internal stress and anxiety. And you're cutting yourself off from the internal hormonal biological advantages that come from just making a little switch on the inside to accessing those hormonal chemical resources that provide you with very, very empowering coping strategies.
And I think this is a good time to, because we mentioned this just before we came on, and I said, we're coming up to Christmas.
Oh gosh,
this
I'm
is
shocked.
You know,
when I saw Christmas decorations, I'm like, hold on a minute, wait, what? What?
No, it's insane. This year has just been so crazy. And my partner Ross and I were talking just before, and we were kind of laughing because we were thinking about when we went into lockdown.
Yeah.
And just the insanity of it. And I find it weird to think that weird few days we had at the beginning of the year with Australian bushfires, where everything that was this year, that the lockdowns were this year. I just feel like it has just been
massive what's happened to the planet.
Yeah.
And that has massively affected all of us at a subconscious level. We have all our nervous systems have been impacted. Yep. You know, anytime that our nervous system likes predictability and it likes familiarity. And when there isn't predictability and when there isn't familiarity, the nervous system interprets that as a threat. And it puts us subconsciously, automatically into the stress part of our nervous system.
Yeah.
So this is why it is so important to manage the nervous system and to do something with the stress in our lives if we want to prevent burnout. And I'm going to take it as far and say, and if we want to prevent mental health challenges, because at the heart of all mental health challenges, and I've been there, I've had the whole range, depression, PTSD, anxiety, every single range of mental health. And I know at the heart of mental health challenges are unregulated stress responses, unregulated nervous system, unsupported nervous system, and an internal negative dialogue that is not being managed, that is not in check. And that's why, you know, like the system that I use with my clients feeds all of these things and a lot more, because it's got to be, you need a holistic approach when you're burnt out or when you're recovering from a chronic disease. You need to do something for your body. You need to do something for your mind. You need to do something for your emotions. You need to do something for your nervous system. You need to do something for your stress. You need to do something for your life and for your environment.
Yeah.
It can't be one-dimensional, the solution.
Yeah.
And that's actually another reason why the talk therapy, I'm not a big fan of it, and it never really worked for me.
Absolutely. So I think about as we come into Christmas, and I feel actually this year it could be harder for some people. I mean, you know, job losses have been significant,
huge, very real.
So there are lots of things, and I feel like already out on the road, things are a bit crazy.
Yes, totally. Like the road rage is getting more and more, isn't it?
Yeah. So what can we do to kind of walk into the next, you know, month or so and be a little bit sort of calmer or sort of respond differently?
Yeah, I think, thanks for asking that question. So I think one of the most important things that we can do, not just at this time of year, but at any time in our lives where things are, you know, kind of like getting to us is to just stop and pause, acknowledge what is happening, and to normalize it, right? To normalize it on the inside, because it is so normal for all of us to be feeling what we're feeling right now, because what we're going through as a planet, individually and as a planet, is not only unprecedented, it is not in line with an internal response of safety and stability. So it is 110% normal that we're all feeling what we're feeling. And I think it's really important to normalize it and to allow ourselves to feel it without trying to avoid it, without trying to suppress it, and without trying to do something with it, you know, to talk it down or do something with it. The other thing is and I know it sounds cliched, Helen, I know it sounds cliched, but it works, is actually to talk to yourself the way that you would talk to someone that you care about who is in distress. And now there's so much science out there around, you know, self-compassion, self-friending, whatever you want to call it, because it goes back to what are you telling yourself on the inside, because that's going to make a huge difference. So if your child were to come to you, your best friend, your partner, and they're telling you they're rattled by what's going on, they can't believe, you know, blah, 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 whatever it is that is bothering us, what would you say to them? What language would you use? What tone would you use? What words would you use? And then can you please think about maybe just reversing that back to you, right? And talking to yourself that way, in that same tone, with the same words and with the same language, so that you're not actually creating more internal negativity and more internal stress. The other thing is that I would highly recommend that you do is to find a way, carve out a way to support others, support the community, support someone who needs it. The science is conclusive about giving and supporting as medicine. Because when you are in sharing mode, when you are doing something for someone else, when you are caring for someone else, when you are benefiting someone else, it totally puts you in a totally different part of the brain and the nervous system that cannot do the problem, right? It is the smart brain. When you are sharing and caring and giving, you're accessing your smart brain. You're accessing the more evolved parts of the brain. And when you're in that part of the brain, you can't be doing the problem behavior at the same time. The other thing is to care for the body and regularly release tensions from the physical body. When we talked about how the mind lives in the body, you know, like do something regularly to move tensions and stresses out of the body. And that could look like so many things. That yes, exercise is very important, but I don't think it's enough. You know, yoga is great, but I also actually don't think that it's enough. It's accessing, you know, the meridians in the body and the fascia in the body and the myofascia in the body where emotions and thoughts get locked in. So I hope these have given you some ways to start thinking about what you could be doing differently. And I would also say, you know, maybe, you know, identifying what your trigger situations are over holidays and just thinking ahead about how you could re-engineer those. I mean, I'm considered to be a Christmas Grinch, and that's because totally, and I stand by it because I don't want to get myself into the frenzy of Christmas, and therefore I have communicated very clearly with the people that I love, you know, about why I do Christmas the way I do, and it's not about them, but this is what I need to remain sane during the holiday, and can they support it? And can I tell you, Helen, that a lot of people now, because this is now I'm going on to 7 years of doing Grinching at Christmas, a lot of my friends actually now ask if they can Grinch with me. And a lot of them say, oh, I'm pulling a Faye for Christmas this year. And, you know, because for me, I want to start off my new year feeling well, good, happy, and centered. I'm not totally frazzled.
That's so funny, Faye, because I am a Christmas Grinch too.
Are you?
I am a total Grinch.
Helen, how do you Grinch?
Well, last year my partner and I said to him, I'm not doing Christmas this year. I think we should book somewhere else. And so he didn't want to do Christmas either. And so we decided we booked our holiday for that time. So we went down to Te Aroha, which was beautiful.
Yeah.
We bought all the food that we wanted, just, the special things and, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And we had a really nice time. We had our dog with us. We went for walks. We had lovely food. And it was just really, really nice. And so I recommend people do that, because we were in the mall the other day, and I'm nosy by nature, and there was this couple sitting next to us when we were eating our sushi, and they were talking about Christmas, and I just wanted to interrupt them and say, because the man was saying, oh, I just wish one year we could, go to a nice hotel, and I just wanted to say to him,
do it. Just do it.
Yeah, just do it.
Hashtag just do it.
Yeah. So I recommend it to anyone, because I think actually you can get together as a family anytime. Why don't just take that stress away and do what you want, because it was such a lovely time. So I endorse doing a fae.
Totally. It's a Helen and Faye. Actually, you know what? We love, my husband and I, we love to go wind down the year in a beautiful place in nature. Like you would pick a new place every single year. And we actually use that time to be very kind to our bodies. So while everybody else is abusing their body, drinking a lot, staying up late, eating a lot, stressing, running around at the malls, we come back in the new year and we are on top of the world, and it feels amazing. And the thing is, I don't know if you necessarily need to go away to do that, although I totally endorse it. But there was one year we weren't able to go away, but still we had those banners. We're like, no, we're not going to be going crazy on the gifts, and we're not going to be going crazy on the food. We're not going to be running around to the malls. We're not going to go crazy on the decorations. This is how we do Christmas. And we had people over, and they loved coming over because it was calm. Yeah. And, I think you just need to do what works for you. And that's part of being true to yourself and examining why you do things, not because everybody else is doing them. What is it that you want to do for yourself for the holiday? How do you want to feel?
It's so true. And I kind of want to touch on this, because I think when you've had cancer, you just afterwards, there's this thing that hangs over you, because it's always that worry. Is it coming back? Is it coming back?
Yeah.
And so there's all those stresses, should I go vegan? Should I, all of this stuff. I haven't done any of that because
for you.
Because it just hasn't felt right for me. And so what I've slowly been doing, and actually as you've been talking, I've been realizing that I could do all of those physical things, but that's actually not going to change in here, because this is the hardest part, is addressing all of that stuff. And so it's just being curious and noticing your reactions. Oh, that's interesting. I seem to be having quite a big response to that.
And not judging it.
And not judging it, and sort of going, oh, I think you might be a bit strung out. So so last week we went out, and I had a complete meltdown afterwards, because one part of my ADHD, I get overstimulated, and being out in the traffic and stuff was, it was too much. And so I said to Ross last night, I said, do you know what? I think leading up to Christmas, we should avoid the roads on the weekends and just do really nice things for ourselves. Yeah. Like I've got a list of sewing projects that I want to get done. He just wants to, relax around the house. We can ride our bikes and get brunch somewhere.
Yes.
And it's exactly what you're saying, of noticing, oh, I can see that response coming up, and thinking, what is going to be the kindest thing I can do for myself as we lead up to the end of a year that has just been like nothing anyone's experienced?
Totally mental. And that's why it's so important, to examine why we do and examine our beliefs. I mean, if you're someone who really enjoys doing Christmas, by all means, I don't think we're here to change the way people do Christmas. But it's, if that's creating stress for you, just examine it, just look at it and just think about it. And a big part of the stress, as you mentioned, and it's a big part of also, the work of transforming stress is looking at the emotional stressors, because is it, oh, I don't want to let people down. Well, what is it behind letting people down that's problematic for you? Oh, I can't say no. Well, that's a huge other discussion, right? Point of discussion. And that's a big thing that causes a lot of stress for a lot of people, the people pleasing and the not being able to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. Faye, it has been so fascinating talking to you.
Great to talk to you, Helen. So good. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And we've had some really lovely feedback. Tina has had many light bulb moments.
I'm so glad, Tina. I'm so glad.
And Fernanda, I think, has had one of those moments where you start thinking about how do I build a bridge between good and bad mood so that it's easier to understand my mind patterns and keep what's healthy and productive. I think it's a really good place to start.
Yeah. And I'm happy if we weren't able to answer any of the questions of your audience, I'm happy to go back and just provide some feedback if that would be helpful.
Yeah, so if people have questions, keep sending them on. I'm going to put up some links to Faye's work and some of the other things that we talked about. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, Helen. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and everyone have a beautiful weekend. Happy Saturday, and we'll talk soon.